Storytelling, how to craft better stories. We seldom understand that there is a massive difference between stories that we see on TV or on the cinema and stories we can tell as communication officers. In fact, the first type of stories for movies, books, poetry are built by professional storytellers, people who spend years and years refining their craft. And if we focus on trying to imitate them, we will probably not manage to get to that level. While the second structure of storytelling that we will cover very much in depth in this course will help us retell the story of a project we've been working on and do that work ourselves. In fact, if you follow step by step this entire lecture and you go on to using the tool we've provided at the end, you will already possess one of these stories. So I await you on the other side. Have a great time watching this entire series and tell us what you thought about it at the end. Storytelling, how to craft better stories. A couple of years ago, I was invited in Slovenia to a very nice conference on how we could talk better to journalists. And during this conference that happened in this very nice place of Portorož between Slovenia, Italy and Croatia, we were exposed to a number of EU-funded projects. Some of them were really interesting, and one in particular retained my attention. And that particular project was a presentation for about 20 minutes of something that happened in this Adriatic region. A scientist and his team had placed a number of beacons, sensors, which would float on top of the sea so as to measure a number of parameters like the water temperature, the speed of the wind, the pollution of the water, a great number of parameters. And they were collecting this data. There were probably about 150 beacons all around the sea. And so the scientist started to explain the entire project live. And what happened is that about 25 minutes after the start of the presentation, I looked around me and I could see in the audience that everybody was completely dying of boredom. And what happened is you could see on the face of people like, can I escape? Can I run out of this room? The very typical feeling you have in a conference that never ends. But it was only 25 minutes in the presentation. So the scientist went on to the conclusion, explaining why his project was interesting. And at that moment, we started to understand why they actually led this project during 2 or 3 years. The beacon had one function. If someone fell into the water in this particular area, this person would be mapped and we could anticipate where that person would end up 20 or 25 minutes after falling into the water. So we could track his progression, anticipate it, and send a rescue boat at the exact right place where that person would be 25 minutes later. And that would happen in the same way for an oil spill, for instance. If there was an oil spill, before it reached the beach, the shore, we would have data on that and contain it before it actually harms any of the shore. So what we discovered in the very last minute of the presentation was the why. What was the actual problem the scientist was trying to resolve with these 150 beacons? And that's where I started to understand that storytelling, especially in the case of EU projects, have one massive flaw. If you do not start with the problem, you do not engage people to understand why you made the entire project and why you invested so long, so much time of your life to make it happen. So starting with the problem would have completely transformed the way the audience would have received that story, and we would have probably, after 25 minutes, clapped, probably made a standing ovation to that scientist for the beauty of that particular solution. What happens is, in storytelling, we need to respect structures, and in EU-funded project, we need to respect an even better structure. In the next minutes, we will go through a great number of explanations why the structure is fundamental, but as well you will understand that there is a massive difference between telling a story for potential users of a project or telling a story to people who might retell that story forwards, like journalists, for instance, or politicians. So let's continue on this particular sequence. If you're interested in telling better stories on your projects, that's where you should follow.